Hello, my name is Lisa Keys and I'm a 5th grade teacher at Sally Humble Elementary School. I'm so excited to begin sharing with you our guidebook lesson, Unit 1, The Birchbark House. I hope that you've had an opportunity to watch some of the Set the Context videos to gain a little bit of background information, a knowledge on choices from our past with Native Americans and settlers, as well as becoming familiar with the Ojibwe Native American culture and their life. Today, we are going to look at Lesson 1. But before we dig into Lesson 1, we are going to look at something that Monroe City Schools has adopted as part of our writing curriculum. It's called the Writing Revolution. And as we begin this unit, the lessons I'll cover, lessons 1 through 5, will focus on sentences and fragments. You probably remember those from even 1st grade, but we remember how important it is to be strong writers. That's one of our standards that we want to create for 5th grade students, is to be good writers. This method improves students' writing skill, and so today we're going to look at sentences and fragments. Sentences are the basic building blocks of writing. If you'll remember, a fragment is a group of words that is not a complete sentence, whereas a sentence is a group of words that includes a subject, predicate, and expresses a complete thought. It begins with a capital letter and ends with a punctuation mark. Now, that sounds easy. We remember that. But when we speak, we don't always speak in complete sentences. So, for example, if I said, "What did you do last night?" we would respond with something maybe like, "Ate a great meal." But in our writing, if we just wrote, "Ate a great meal," that's not a sentence. I would need to put something in there. For example, last night for our graduation party, we ate a great meal. And that makes it a complete sentence. Same thing if I just were to say, "Robert and Jack." Well, what about Robert and Jack? We need more information to make it a complete thought. So, Robert and Jack ate a great meal before they went out of town. Those are some examples. So, as you look at this practice, I want you to see, is the following a sentence or a fragment? Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. Notice that none of them are capitalized so that we will make sure we understand that. We know that it must be capitalized and have no punctuation. But I know the who, but I don't know the what. That is a fragment. We would need to add to that. The sailors were tired and frightened. Well, I know who and what. So, yes, that's a complete thought. The sailors were tired and frightened. We would make sure we put correct punctuation and capitalization. In 3 small ships. What in 3 small ships? What did they do? Who was there? That's a fragment. So as we go through this entire unit, we will have bell ringers. We will have, in the middle of our lesson, an opportunity. We will have exit tickets, and all of these will help us see how we can make our writing better based on the things that we're reading. For our 5 lessons, as I've said, we will be focusing on sentences and fragments. So be watching for that with me. So as an overview of the entire unit, we will be looking at, by the end of this unit, you will read literary and informational text to analyze the effect of the Europeans on the Native American way of life. We will explore how characters respond to challenges and how characters' decisions impact the lives of others. We will learn about character and theme development and discuss how point of view is important for constructing meaning. There may be other videos of point of view and theme, but as a quick review, let's talk about our characters, the people in our passages, how they have development with theme. Well, theme means the life lesson, the message, the moral, what our author wants us to learn for our life about this passage. How important that is to see what we can carry on and maybe how it will impact our life. Also, we will discuss point of view, another area you may have seen a video on. Point of view is huge. You may be quickly able to identify first or third person as point of view, remembering the pronouns I, we, or he and she. When we look at that, though, it is so important to see who's actually telling the story. Point of view helps us understand that we may see overall everyone's thoughts and opinions, or maybe just one person's thoughts and opinions. And that makes a difference in what we see from the story. So we're going to keep that in mind as we read through these mini stories throughout this unit. You will show that you have met the unit goals and understand this complex text by writing a literary analysis to explain how a character changes over time. You will write an essay about the impact of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the New World, reading, discussing, and writing about text. Now, our main text that we will read in the unit is the Birchbark House. It is a fictional passage and it's about a girl named Amachius and how she responds to challenges during 1 year of her life. We'll look through all the seasons. At the end of this unit, you will be asked to write a literary analysis of the main events of each season of Amachius' life and how Amachius grows throughout the novel. This will show if you understand what we read and learn in this unit, including the character development, theme, and character interactions. You will also, in another part of an extension task, engage in research to examine Christopher Columbus's impact on the lives of the Native Americans. This means that over the course of the unit, we will build our understanding of Christopher Columbus and his voyages so that you can explain how his actions affected the lives of the Native Americans. You will also read a fictional account of Christopher Columbus's first voyage from the point of view, that phrase again, of a crew member. This will help you as you write a journal entry as if you were on Columbus's voyage. So, as we look through many of these things, we will be looking at a fictional passage, the Birchbark House, and then we will look at many nonfiction passages where we'll identify and find out some research about Christopher Columbus and his impact on Native American way of life. And then also there will be an opportunity for a cold read on the fictional account of Columbus's story from Pedro's journal. So today we're jumping right in. We are going to listen to a read aloud from Before Columbus, the Americas of 1491, determine the meaning of unknown words and phrases from the text, and discuss the time period for this unit. Depending on the situation of when you are watching this video, you may have a student guidebook. You may have a journal, something like this that maybe you're using as a reading log. You can put down facts and information in there, take notes. You will have in your student resources eventually an area where you can create a vocabulary chart that you will use. Now I'm going to read aloud page 53 and 54 of Before Columbus, the Americas of 1491. These two small pages simply consider how did the first Americans travel to America. Think about any important ideas you may find in this passage. Our author for this book is Charles Mann, and we want to make sure when we read nonfiction that we give credit to our authors and that we know that this is what they have researched to find out about. This is long, long ago. We know Native Americans first came to the Americas from somewhere in the Old World of Africa, Europe, and Asia. What we don't know is when. Experts have argued about it for many decades. Each discovery seems to push the arrival of people in the Americas further back in time. Who were the first Americans? At the end of the 15th century, Christopher Columbus showed Europeans the way to the Americas. Columbus didn't realize what he found. He went to his grave claiming that he had landed on the shores of Asia near India. That's why he called the people he found there Indians. He was wrong, but the name stuck. So, who was Christopher Columbus? We'll begin a word wall where we will look at names, places, words that we're not familiar with, or maybe that we are throughout this unit. We read that Christopher Columbus was an explorer who discovered the Americas. All right, so, but he also mentioned the term Europeans. Well, Europeans sounds a little bit like Europe, so maybe that has to do with the fact that they were from Europe, people who come from Europe. That's what Christopher Columbus did. As soon as Europeans realized that the Americas were not part of Asia, they attempted to determine where the Indians had come from. The name Native Americans didn't fit the view of world history that most Europeans shared in the 16th century and for some time afterward. This view of history came from the Christian Bible, which said that all human beings and animals drowned in Noah's flood except for those on the ark. The passengers of the ark were believed to be the ancestors of all living things on earth. The ark was thought to have landed in the mountains of Turkey. It was easy to see how people and animals had spread from there to Africa, Asia, and Europe. But how had those people and animals managed to cross the oceans and populate the Americas? Well, how did they get there? It mentioned something about an ark. Well, we're familiar, an ark is a boat. Did they go by boat? One possible way. The word populate, population, the number of people in an area. That's what that's talking about. How did those people get there? Many theories. One of the first to tackle the question was a Roman Catholic teacher named Jose de Acosta, who spent 25 years in Spain's Mexico colony. In 1590, Acosta wrote that the Indians, like all humans, had to be descendants of the biblical first man, Adam. This meant that the Indians must have originated in the Old World and then walked to the Americas. If people had walked to the Americas, Acosta wrote, America and Asia must join somewhere. Hundreds of years later, scientists would prove him right. In the meantime, though, Europeans kept trying to figure out which group of Europeans or Asians had been the ancestors of the Indians. People had all sorts of ideas. The Indians could have descended from ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, or Jewish tribes. A few people even claimed that the Native Americans were the last survivors of the mythical lost continent of Atlantis. Then in the 19th century, the remains of the ancient human ancestors began to turn up in Europe. Scientists started to understand that people had been living in Europe since the Ice Ages, when glaciers covered the northern lands, tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. Consequently, if early humans had lived in Europe during the Ice Ages, maybe humans also inhabited the Americas at the same time. People started searching the Americas for evidence of these inhabitants. So in the last paragraph, two new words, Ice Age, Native Americans. So as we think about what it said with Ice Age, I don't know a lot about the Ice Age. However, it makes sense that it would be a time when there was ice. It says glaciers covered a lot of the land. Ice Age would be a time when there was a lot of ice. And then Native Americans, as we will begin to continue and discuss, were they the first ones? Where did they come from? People who were here. So as we continue our unit, we'll discuss and talk about Native Americans and where they come from. Now, as we stop for just a minute to think about how they got here, we're going to do a little activity with TWR. We have here sentence fragments. Remember we talked about that they are not complete thoughts. We're going to turn these fragments into complete sentences and add capitalization punctuation. I'll do a few together with you, and then I'll let you do a few on your own at home in your journals, if you have those, your student resources, or even on a sheet of paper. Showed Europeans the way to the Americas. Well, on our word wall, we just identified that it was Christopher Columbus. Who showed Europeans the way? That's a fragment. But if I add the who, then we get a complete sentence. But remember, we have to have a capital letter to begin, as well as a proper noun. Christopher Columbus showed Europeans the way to the Americas. And notice that I capitalized European and Americas as proper nouns, as well as the first word, again a proper noun, Christopher Columbus, and we have in punctuation. All of those are key. We tend to forget those little bitty things. Well, then we also had on our word wall our second word, Europeans, are people from Europe. Who are people from Europe? Europeans. As we continue to just discuss the next three, if we're to write these at home or in class, blank is the number of people in an area, because we see we're missing something. What is the number of people in an area? Population is the number of people in an area. Built a bridge. Who built a bridge? Is that one of the theories? Did people build a bridge? People build a bridge to get to the Americas. And then we look at the Ice Age. What about the Ice Age? Well, it was a time when glaciers covered the earth. The Ice Age is a time when glaciers covered the earth. Makes that a complete sentence if you were to do that in your writing. So you should have in your student resources a vocabulary chart where you may write the word, the definition, maybe a synonym, where you found it, and a picture. Throughout the unit, we'll be adding, and you see from our word wall, we have now Christopher Columbus, Europeans, Native Americans, and Ice Ages. We can add this information into our vocabulary chart. Maybe you're familiar with some of these words, maybe you're not. Here's an opportunity to do this. Take a minute, write this down. Here's some examples with a picture. Christopher Columbus, we found a picture. You have technology advantages at home, and you could do something like this. You could add pictures here. He was a European explorer. Other words, we really don't have another word to replace Christopher Columbus, so we could leave that blank. Europeans, people who originated from Europe. Native Americans, you see we can add all of this, the first people to travel to the New World. Other names for them were Indians or First Americans. And this comes from the book we just read. We use a quote from a sentence. The Native Americans didn't fit the view of the world history that most Europeans shared in the 16th century and sometimes afterward. That's giving them credit for the before Columbus and quoting the page number. Ice Age, image here, time when the glaciers covered the earth. Scientists started to understand that people had been living in Europe since the Ice Ages when glaciers covered the northern lands. That also is taken from before Columbus, the Americas, 1491, page 54. When we give a sentence, we want to make sure we give credit to whom it is written for. So, our next question, and review this skill from 4th grade, the main idea. Well, we had a nonfiction passage, so very important to understand the details. What are the main ideas from page 53 and 54? Before Columbus and the Americas of 1491. What was it like? Well, we had Native Americans, whom Christopher Columbus called Indians, must have come from the Old World, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Christopher Columbus showed Europeans America, or the New World. And then we saw some theories of how people must have come. Remember, that was the key word I wanted you to look for. How did they get here? Native Americans must have come from Noah's Ark, another boat, or walked to the New World. It also focused on the fact that the Ice Age was a time when glaciers covered the earth. Those are the key points, the main ideas for chapter 3, from pages 53 and 54. As we look at this, that's important to think about that you may have picked up on your own. As a skill, I want you to practice finding those key points and main ideas. Again, as another activity, we have an opportunity now to do a TWR where we see that you are to write S if the words form a complete sentence, then capitalize and punctuate the sentence, but then write F if it's a fragment and change the fragment into complete sentences. So, as we look at these, again, I'll just do a few of them, and you will see we have Native Americans. Is that a sentence or a fragment? Native Americans, what? We don't know. So we're going to say that this is a fragment. Okay, we write F, Native Americans. Well, now it says if it's a fragment, change it into a complete sentence. So, Native Americans were the first people in the New World. And in punctuation, make sure we see that. So, look at number 2. Early people traveled from Africa, Asia, and Europe. Wait a minute, we have a who, and we have a what? Oh, if we add the correct capitalization and punctuation, this makes it a sentence. So we write S. Then I simply copy it correctly. Early people traveled from Africa, Asia, and Europe. Notice I began the first word capitalized, as well as Africa, Asia, and Europe are also capitalized as proper nouns. Then we have in punctuation. Now, we could look at number 3, 4, and 5 and discuss these. You could do these on your own with the Ice Age. We've seen is a fragment. But we know that the Ice Age was a time when glaciers covered the land. Number 4, Christopher Columbus and other European explorers. Who, but what? We don't know, so we would have to add. Christopher Columbus and other European explorers traveled to the New World. Number 5 says scientists studied the Native Americans. That makes sense. Who and what? Scientists studied the Native Americans. We would simply rewrite that with capital letter and punctuation. So as we look at our TWR skills of sentences and fragments, we are also seeing that it ties into our main ideas and things that we're reading about right now, the first passage and story that we read. In this lesson, you learned early theories of how, that keyword, how Native Americans came to the New World. Was it by boat? Did they go in an ark? Did they go by walking? You also determine the meaning of unknown words and phrases. Christopher Columbus, Europeans, Ice Age, Native Americans, and phrases using context clues in the reference material. We're looking at our main passage for today and before Columbus, the Americans of 1491.